YouTube fellow community, David Leaf fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens. We are here today for a very special interview with David Leaf, filmmaker, author, professor, you name it. Very, very important guy in the Beach Boys history, if you will. And David, thank you so much for being here. I'm so stoked to talk to you today.
It's my pleasure. You know, after seeing you on the web, it was like, I got to talk to this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I've known your name for years. When I first picked up the two-fer CDs back in the day, you were the one who did the liner notes, and I learned so much about the band from your words, and let alone that the box set and everything else.
Well, that box set was really amazing. In that, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. It was the first time that the Smile music had ever been officially released in the original sessions. And I think we had close between like disc 2 and the bonus disc, there's like an hour of Smile sessions. And when deep in the recesses of my mind, it's like 40% of the box was unreleased, was some number like that. So I was a record buyer, I was a fan, so I wanted to make sure that people were getting their money's worth.
Oh yeah, completely. I mean, a friend of mine had that box set as a kid, and I grew up listening to it. I only just got a copy myself in the last couple of years, but that thing was a part of my childhood, so that was very instrumental to getting into the Beach Boys. But
very cool.
A couple of things I wanted to ask you about. You've made some of my favorite documentaries ever, like the U.S. versus John Lennon and Beautiful Dreamer, the Smile Story. The way you bring these people to life, the way you take a celebrity and show them as a human being going through their day-to-day motions. What inspires you to tell someone's story and make them so grounded and so relatable? How do you translate that?
Wow, that's I didn't even know I did it, let alone explain how I do it. The simple truth is I love to talk and tell stories. So I think of myself as the audience for these movies. What do I want to see? And I don't think it's any more complicated than that. Then it's a matter of editing.
Yeah.
and the mountains of footage that you shoot to winnow it down to an hour and 40 minutes or 2 hours is staggering. And I remember when I interviewed Barry Gibb for a film called This Is Where I Came In. It was about, I think it came out in 2000 on A&E.
Yeah.
And I had worked with the Bee Gees for, at that point, over 20 years. So, not regularly, but I had worked on a number of different things with them, including writing their what was called their authorized autobiography.
That's so cool. Yeah.
And so there's a certain level of trust that builds up over time. I mean, it was, I was at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when Brian Wilson inducted the Bee Gees and sang Too Much Heaven. So, I mean, there are these amazing moments that you get to experience, and then there's a lot of work in between.
Right.
That you're happy to do, you're happy to have, but it's still a lot of it's work. Barry Gibb actually made that documentary extremely easy. When we sat down and shot the interview, it was the first interview we shot for the film. And when we were finished, I remember I stood up and said to my then partner, I said, we don't need to talk to anybody else. He just told us the whole story. Now, that's not the way the world works. Right. But he just felt comfortable. He looked great. I mean, he's like one of the greatest looking guys in the history of rock and roll.
Completely. Yeah.
And he's just he was in great spirits that day, and he told the story beautifully. And then it was, okay, now I've got to talk to Robin and Morris, and I've got to talk to each of their wives, and I've got to talk to Mr. Gibb, or Mr. Gibb was passed away, Mrs. Gibb at that point, and Andy had passed away.
Yeah.
So we talked to a couple other people, but we didn't need to talk to anybody else. And I remember when we turned in the cut to A&E, the then head of A&E biography said to me, he said, you know, David, I think that you have too much of the Bee Gees in this documentary. And she said, you know, the name of the series is biography, not autobiography.
Oh my God.
And me being, I've always been a obnoxious smartass, but in those days I was much worse than I am today. I said to her, I said, that the reason for that is most of the biographies you do are on dead people. You can't get interviews with them. And we didn't have to take any Bee Gees out. We'll leave it at
that. I mean, you might as well have the story told by the people who actually were the story what's about. I mean, yeah.
Yes. And that's the philosophy behind all my courses.
Yeah.
At UCLA is the people who do it and do it really well are the people who I put up on stage if I can persuade them to come to UCLA. And so in my songwriters class, I remember the first year I taught it, the class is called Songwriters on Songwriting, Killer Hooks, Essential Songs, and Songwriters of the Rock Era.
I love it.
Longest subtitle in history, I think. Anyway, the first week, my guest was Mike Stoller.
Whoa.
Second week, my guests were Man and Weil. The third week, I had Jimmy Webb. The fourth week, I had Lamont Dozier.
Oh my God.
The fifth week, I had Mac Davis. It was like these. So my students are learning from the greatest people who have ever done it.
Yeah.
And they're not learning how to write songs, although they will learn how these people wrote songs. What they're learning how to do is how to be successful. What does it take to go from writing a tractor in Oklahoma to being Jimmy Webb? And in all my courses, I'm trying to teach life lessons of how to be successful. Because most of my students obviously are not going to become songwriters.
Sure, yeah.
Most of my students in my documentary class, plug docs that rock, docs that matter. Most of the students are not going to become documentarians, although some will. I've had some songwriters in my songwriting class who have gotten songwriting contracts and are making a living at it.
Awesome.
I can tell you for sure that none of the people in my Beatles class are going to become Beatles, but the people who they are seeing on stage are people who either worked with the Beatles or worked with one of the Beatles.
Yeah.
So they're hearing real stories. They're not hearing musical analysis. They're not hearing biographers or writers with a specific slant. They're hearing it from the people who were there. Now, everybody saw it differently. I mean, Paul and George Paul and Ringo in the anthology don't agree on what happened the day they went to meet Elvis.
4 different stories.
So in my class, I tell the students, you're going to hear these stories from different people, and everyone's got a different point of view, and each story is true to them.
Yeah.
But the only essential truth that matters is the music.
Oh yeah, that's the biggest takeaway. Yeah.
And so, and ironically, the course is called The Real Beatles, REEL. So it's not even about the music. It's about the movies they made and the movies made about them.
I love that.
And the amount, you can go down a rabbit hole on the web. You could spend probably 2 months, 40 hours a day, 7 days a week, watching nothing but Beatle interviews and Beatle video. I mean, there's just so much stuff.
It's loaded now with the internet, with the way YouTube is. Oh yeah.
So my job is to curate it and then present it to the students in some sensible way. But for the Beatles course, I interviewed Bill Harry, who founded Mersey Beat.
Yeah.
I interviewed the guy who shot the footage in the Cavern Club, the only footage of them.
Holy.
I interviewed Tony Bramwell, who was with them from Liverpool all the way to the end.
Yeah.
I mean, he's in the All You Need Is Love video. I mean, how much more credibility do you need?
I have his book. Yeah. Yeah.
It's great. I love that book.
Yeah.
I interviewed Peter Brown. I interviewed Peter Asher. I mean, I interviewed Michael Lindsay Hogg to talk about Let It Be and the Hey
Oh,
Jude and Revolution videos.
yeah.
So they're hearing it from the people who were in the room.
Yeah. And
And
that's what brings it to life for me and for a lot of the people who watch this stuff. It creates a context where these people are actual people and you're not reading about it in a book, you know?
right. So to answer so it's a long way to answer your question. So in my documentaries, the people, sadly, obviously John Lennon wasn't there for the film, but there was a massive archive of interviews that we could use.
Yeah.
James Brown died when we were in pre-production of The Night James Brown Saved Boston.
Wow.
And so I never got to meet him or talk to him. But the footage speaks for itself.
Oh, yeah.
The Brian Wilson film, that was a terrifying film to make.
I was going to ask you about that, what it was like to do that, because this is it's so highly regarded as a staple. If you're a Beach Boys fan, you have to see this, own it, live it, breathe it.
Thank you.
What was
I'm really proud of it.
I would be too. I mean, because having been a Beach Boys fan forever, every Beach Boys fan knows what it's like to watch a Brian Wilson interview where he just doesn't want to do it, and he might not be interested, or doesn't want to be there, or he's joking around with somebody, just wants to get away. Understandable. He doesn't have to do it, but the way he opens up on this movie, he's so candid and so casual and so open about a subject that was terrifying to him for 30 years. I mean, what was that like?
Well, it's I haven't thought about this in a while, but to answer your question, the answer to the question is both yes and no. So we set up, in the movie where he plays Rhapsody in Blue.
Yeah.
And he plays Beautiful Dreamer.
Yeah.
And he goes, BDW, Beautiful Brian Douglas Wilson. That's me. That happened essentially by accident.
Oh, man.
We were set up for a multi-camera shoot in a studio. Very expensive shoot. And I wanted to interview him about Smile. And he did not want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Now, this was before we went to London.
Oh, okay.
So now I'm like desperate. How am I going to rescue? The interview is not working.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how much he likes me or trusts me. How am I going to rescue this expensive shooting day?
Yeah.
So I said, okay, let's forget about the interview. Sit down at the piano. Let's just talk about music.
Cool.
And so that's where he played Rhapsody in Blue and that kind of stuff. But so after the Smile performance, the week in London and the tour, and then when he sat down to talk, he was willing to talk and open up and do it in a way that made the film real. And it would have been a real failure had he not done that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, growing up, hearing about Smile, it was always the myth, the album that never was. And then with this box set, I remember hearing some of this stuff as a kid when you're a kid, it's all super far out stuff. So none of it made sense at the time. But, I remember when the Smile album came out, it was humongous that, whoa, you can hold Smile. You can go to the store and buy it. It was unreal. And then when I finally got to see the movie for the first time, seeing how he called up I love that scene where Darian explains calling up Van Dyke Parks. Hey, Van Dyke, do you remember that song? Do you like worms? That for me is one of the best parts of that movie because it's so typically Brian from an outsider point of view. That's such a Brian thing.
Brian knows exactly what he wants and how to get it.
Right, exactly.
And I mean that in terms of his art, which is where it matters.
Right.
He knows what he needs. Darian, it's mentioned that he's kind of the unsung hero, and he's referred to in the movie, but for 22 years, Darian is the unsung hero.
He's the right-hand man. Yeah.
He is, a brilliant musician, songwriter in his own right. The Wonder Minister, terrific,
Yeah.
LA power pop band. I met Darian probably a decade before there was a Brian Wilson band.
Oh, cool. Wow.
And what I was stunned to learn, I actually had Darian talk about it in my course, in my documentary course, the week the students watched Beautiful Dreamer.
Yeah.
He talked about in high school reading my book.
Oh man.
And that's where he first heard about Smile. So there's a surreal nature to all of this. I mean, I read about Smile for the first time, and I think of myself as coming late to the story. I read about it in 1971 in Rolling Stone.
Holy crap. That's
in
awesome.
the epic Tom Nolan story.
Yeah.
Which was timed for the release of the Surf's Up album.
Right.
And it was reading that story and then hearing Surf's Up and going, oh, so this is as great as they're saying. A whole album of this? I want a whole album of this.
Truly.
And at some point, and my college roommate and I don't even know exactly when and exactly how, but at some point it like became fixated in my head. I'm going to move to California, write a book about Brian Wilson, become his friend, and help him finish Smile. That's how crazy I was. And the second day I was in Los Angeles, I hadn't been here 48 hours. I arrived on a Saturday night. Monday morning, I went to the corner of 5th and Broadway in Santa Monica, where the unemployment office was.
Okay.
I was transferring my unemployment claim from New York to California because that's how I was going to support myself while, as a struggling, starving writer, I was going to try to get a job.
Yeah.
Quick note, first job in the music business, mailroom, Casablanca Records.
Love it.
People wonder where you start. You start at the bottom. Monday morning, I go there, walk out of the building, cross the street, heading north on 5th Street. I cross Broadway, heading north. Walking towards me is Dennis Wilson.
Oh, man.
Well, I didn't know it. That was the corner where the Brothers studio was.
Okay. I got you. Okay.
And that's why he was there. I was there. Anyway, I had the nerve to walk up to him and say, "Hi, Dennis. My name is David Leaf. I just moved to California to write a book about your brother, Brian." And that was his reaction. He laughed and he said, "Good luck." And honestly, from that moment till the moment the book came out was almost exactly 3 years.
So when did you move out there? Was that 74, 75?
75.
75?
Fall of 75, yeah.
So they had 15 big ones. I guess they were working on 15 big ones by then.
15 big ones. They were working on it, and that was the big letdown.
Yeah.
As a Beach Boy.
Yeah.
And it was after that I started Pet Sounds magazine, the short-lived Pet Sounds magazine. But that's how I ended up getting the book contract. Long story we don't have time for today.
Right.
So what more can I tell you that will be of interest to you and by proxy to the people who are watching?
My biggest thing I wanted to ask is, you've known Brian for so long, and we feel like you know a side of him that he doesn't show to the public, because obviously when you're a celebrity, you want to keep some of yourself to yourself. What's Brian like in real life?
I don't think he thinks of himself as I'm a celebrity, so I'm not going to show my real self.
Okay.
I think he's just he wasn't this way from what his high school friend Rich Sloan told me. He was a fun-loving guy.
Yeah.
He was it's hard to think of him as the quarterback of the football team, a star athlete in high school.
It's crazy.
He according to Rich, loved to make people laugh.
Yeah.
So if we think of the two things that Brian had, he loved to make people laugh and he loved to make music.
Yeah.
And at some point, those, we can, books have been written as to why that stopped.
Yeah.
By the time I met him, he had been through this. He was now the guy who had written Till I Die.
Right. Right.
And to me, that was, it's kind of like an oral, AURAL, cry for help.
Yeah.
That's how I heard it.
Yeah.
And, I once said to him, I'm that leaf on a windy day. And, he looked, he just shook his head. He still loves to laugh. He still loves to have fun.
Yeah.
It's showing that side of him. He never showed that side publicly, really.
That's a good point. That's a good
So
point.
it's not like it's not, he stopped touring because he didn't want to be in front of the people's eye. When he was kind of dragged out of semi-retirement, if you will, and put into the 15 Big Ones TV special, there he is on display.
Yeah.
For what purpose? To promote an album.
I know.
And so from that moment on, when he's been in the public eye, it's been to promote something.
Yeah. That's a good point.
And so that's, and I don't think that's not his natural state. His natural state is to sit at the piano and play music.
And make something. Yeah.
Or he loves what he calls casual singing.
Huh.
Just singing.
I
like
that.
driving in the car and singing.
Yeah.
There's a movie that's coming out, that's premiering at Tribeca I think it's next month. A new documentary about Brian.
Long Promised Road. Yeah.
An ironic title.
I know. Yeah.
But I saw a rough cut of about 20 minutes or so of it years ago, and it's people want to know what Brian Wilson is really like. This is what Brian Wilson is really like.
Awesome. That's exciting to hear that, because I mean, everyone cares about him so much, and as a Beach Boys fan, it's almost like you protect him. Yeah.
Yeah. There is. Look, well, there's a subset of Beach Boys fans who are what you're talking about. There's the larger Beach Boy population of fans is not interested in Smile or Brian's psychodramas or Brian's solo career. It's the nature of fans. They have a group, they love a group, they want to see the greatest hits.
Right, exactly.
People, before the pandemic, people went to see Billy Joel once a month at Madison Square Garden, and he would give the people what they wanted.
Yeah.
He's a guy who could without any, it would take work, but he could put out an album every other year of 10 or 12 great new Billy Joel songs.
Completely.
People don't want to hear it. People reach a point where they don't want to hear new stuff from their artist. Yeah. Ask Paul McCartney.
Yeah, I remember reading a thing with Paul Stanley from Kiss saying the exact same thing. He was like, we could put out our best album ever tomorrow and no one would care. It's like, He's got a point. Yeah.
And so artists are making it for a smaller community of fans, and they're more than anything, they're making it for themselves.
Yeah.
This is like Brian, there's a great piece you might direct the audience to or intercut it here, where he's in the George Martin special about 1996, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Where he talks about songs bursting out of your heart.
Yeah.
It's like, they have to come out.
Yeah.
I think that's Brian Wilson.
I love that.
And the Brian Wilson who's in the Smile film is relaxed enough to talk to me because he has the ultimate monkey off his back.
Oh, yeah.
The late David Anderle says it in the movie, the longest gestation period in history. He gets pregnant with Smile in 1966, and he gives birth in 2004. I mean, it's inconceivable. It really is.
Yeah. One of the things I wrote down was that obviously music has been a huge part of your life. Your work, to me and to a lot of other people, is so important to the history of music, because a lot of times music is our history. We have these conversations with the stories we've told through songs, and they're passed down. And generations can come together to appreciate the same story. What is it like for you as a filmmaker and a storyteller to leave work that future generations will appreciate hundreds of years from now? Like, what kind of far out feeling is that?
It's kind of essential to me.
Yeah.
That's why I'm teaching these courses at UCLA and everything's being recorded, because there will be a point in a not too distant future where there will be nobody alive who worked with a Beatle.
Terrifying.
Who can talk about it. And so, if all goes well, my archives will be in the UCLA Special Collections Library.
Right.
So if somebody wants to study Brian Wilson or the Bee Gees or the Beatles or James Brown or John Lennon, the work I did will be there for people to look at in the raw sense of it, not to watch the documentary, but here's the 60 hours that aren't in the film. And so it's important to me that that's my legacy, which is a very, highfalutin word to use. But, as you get older, you think about those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't set out to do that. That was not my goal when I started. I would have been happy, writing on Cheers.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Not a bad.
I was a class clown, smartass, and I was always looking for the punchline. These films are kind of the opposite. You can't really look for a punchline. The only time I was really able to do that was in my Hard Day's Night documentary.
Yeah.
Where there was a TV series at the time called Dream On, which doesn't seem to be anywhere anymore.
Never heard of it. No.
But it was an early HBO show, and what it was a guy living his life, and every now and then they would put in a clip from a TV commercial or a movie or something that would kind of be like what he was thinking.
Sure.
And I remember, so when I got hired to do this Hard Day's Night documentary, I said to the producer, here's my idea. I want to watch the executive producer was Walter Shenson. What I want to do is I want to watch a Hard Day's Night, and I want to isolate every single time the Beatles are on camera with a one-liner. And I want to use those one-liners to answer the sound bites.
Right.
So the documentary has the same irreverent feel as the movie.
Oh my God. I mean, they have so many one-liners in that movie. It's daunting.
Right. So for the one that sticks in my head is Roger Ebert, the late great film critic, says something about the movie that's very critic worthy. And then we cut to Ringo, there you go, using your highfalutin words, or something like that from Hard Day's Night, because the whole idea was for it to be as irreverent as a Hard Day's Night.
I love that.
When I showed Walter Shenson the first cut, he watched it and he said, how long is this? And I said, it's around 90 minutes. And he says, well, this is going to work. He says, but you've made a making of documentary that's longer than the actual movie. So take out the back and forths that don't quite work. Take out the ones that don't work really at all. Just leave the ones that are working perfectly. And that's what I did. And then we ended up with like a 60-minute documentary. So that's the only time in my documentary work I got to be a smartass. If Brian Wilson fans want to look for something really obscure, look for his guest appearance on a television show called The New Leave It to Beaver.
Oh yeah, that's
Have you seen that?
Very popular in the Brian Wilson community. Yeah, I had no idea you were behind that show either.
So I was a staff writer on that show.
That's so cool.
For 2 seasons, and the head producer and the head writer was like, "Do you think you could get?" We had an episode where we needed a teacher to play a song. And he said, "Do you think we could get Brian Wilson?" I said, "I don't know. I'll ask."
Yeah.
And he's, said yes. And we named the character Mr. Hawthorne.
Perfect.
And but that's got to be the most obscure moment in Brian's career. I'm guessing.
It's
I haven't
okay.
seen it. Is it on the web anywhere?
It's on YouTube. It was on YouTube. I'm not sure if it's there now. It's been a minute since I've seen it, but it was there. Yeah. One last thing I'll ask you. This is non-Beach Boys related, but I know you were. I'm not sure if you still are. Are you still a voter in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
I am.
What band would you love to see that's not in there right now? Can you speak on that? Because I know it's a very complicated process.
Well, it's not. I have no say. I get the ballot.
Okay.
So I have to choose by what I'm presented with. I think I grew up as a baseball fan. And to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame, you needed to reach a certain level of statistics.
Sure.
It was pure and simple. Nobody cared whether your team got to the World Series. Did you have 2,000 hits? Did you have a career average over 300? Did you win 250 games even though your team was a loser? You're in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
So from that point of view, Three Dog Night is the group that I think should be in the Hall of Fame, because nobody had more hits than them from, say, 68 to 74. Nobody had more hits than them. Nobody had more number one hits than them.
Yeah.
Massive. I think the fact that they didn't write their own songs is the reason they've never even been on the ballot.
Okay.
However, the thing that, and nobody at the Hall of Fame, I'm not talking to anybody about it, but Danny Hutton, who's a dear, dear man, and probably Brian Wilson's greatest friend in the music business for all these years. He was the one who would sit and listen to mountains of cassettes that were sent by publishers for people wanting to get songs on their album.
Wow.
They were the first ones to record Elton John in America. Oh yeah. They took Hoyt Axton to number one. They took Randy Newman to number one. They had a way. So is arranging and singing and song selection and producing not good enough to get in the Hall of Fame? I guess not.
Yeah.
There are other groups. The Turtles is a group I love. I don't know. I don't think they had quite enough hits, and but then they morphed into Flo and Eddie, and they were a lot of fun in the 70s. I remember seeing them. Should Tommy James and the Shondells be in there? I don't know. Should Gary Puckett and the Union Gap? But none of those aren't on my list. My list would go Three Dog Night, and then I'd have to pause and think. It took a long time for the Zombies to get in. I know,
way too long, and they were instrumental for. They only had a couple albums, but their impact is huge. Yeah.
And thank God, Colin Blunstone's voice is one of those forces of nature that no one's ever had.
And he still sounds great.
He's the first rock star I ever interviewed.
Really? He seems like a nice guy. Like, generally is a nice person.
He is exactly as he appears. I think, he wasn't a flamboyant performer.
Yeah.
When you look at clips on YouTube of him singing like on a TV show or something, he's just standing there and singing with this incredible voice.
Yeah.
And I guess that wasn't enough.
He wasn't smashing anything.
But the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is it is what it is. It's better than there not being one.
Sure.
I wish personally that there had been a separate hip hop Hall of Fame established. Because I think hip hop as an art form deserves its own Hall of Fame, not for hip hop artists to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So I think that would have worked out better, but that didn't happen. So I was quite happy to vote for Jay-Z this year.
Yeah. for me, for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I can see it both ways. I can totally see like hip hop having its own Hall of Fame because it is so instrumental to popular music. But I also see it as being included in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because rock and roll, for me, spans everything. I mean, it's about breaking the rules and changing things and doing your own thing, which is what every genre since Elvis has been like. So I mean, yeah,
Well, well, jazz was like that, and the blues was like that.
right.
So there is like I don't know what they call it, but they put some of those older legends, the pre-rock era legends,
Oh
into
yeah, that's right.
something.
Yeah,
But I also feel like they should have a hall of influences,
oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah,
because there are people in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame who have been voted in. And I'll make some enemies here by saying this, and I know that because say like, for example, Leonard Cohen.
uh-huh.
I don't understand why he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It baffles me.
Yeah, that one I can understand with you on that one. Yeah,
And I think there are a lot of people. If we went down the roster, I could point to this. Maybe there's a half dozen or a dozen who should be in some, other hall. The same way they have like they inducted certain songwriters into the Hall of Fame.
right.
Who and now there's a Songwriters Hall of Fame that's completely separate where they can honor the songwriters. So how does the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame decide which songwriters are worthy and which ones aren't? So, Goff and King are, Manwile probably, Jimmy Webb, I don't think so. I don't think he's there.
I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, MacArthur Park, you're talking about breaking the rules.
yeah.
That broke every rule imaginable.
Hello.
Anytime, you have, yeah. So anyway, we're really lucky. I don't know whether I'll be right 100 years from now, but when I look back at the era from say 55, like in my songwriters class, I literally define the rock era ending with Kurt Cobain's suicide. As crazy as that sounds,
No,
it's just
yeah,
I just kind of pick that as because really hip hop was ascendant in the 80s.
yeah,
But for the most part, white people were ignoring it. But I look at the songwriters, the quantity of great songwriters from 55 to say 1980, even 85, stretch it a little bit. It's an amazing number of people who wrote 20 or 30 or 40 great songs and made a bunch of great albums.
yeah.
And so like the whole singer-songwriter era, which was perfectly timed for me because it was when I was in college.
Yeah.
So like when I went to see Joni Mitchell in concert, Jackson Browne was the opening act.
Oh, cool.
When I went to see James Taylor in concert, he introduced his piano player by saying something. She's going to do a few of her songs that you may know. And it was Carole King.
Oh my God.
Pre-Tapestry.
Oh man.
As I said, I think I was in the right place at the right time. Does Laura Nyro deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame songwriting branch? I don't know. There's an awful lot of people at one time.
Yeah.
So it's going to be your generation's job to fix all these problems.
No, completely. I mean, that's kind of part of why I do this tiny little channel, just to have an outlet for bands that maybe don't have so much of a voice, that I could put some document on the internet for it to last however long the internet will be around for.
Well, that's the big question. You asked me about how does it feel to have created these things that'll be around. So like, it's as long as we have electricity is the answer.
Exactly.
And guess what? 150 years ago, there wasn't electricity. So we're living in this golden moment where, I say to my friends, stop complaining. We have air conditioning, we have the web, we have refrigeration, we have streaming. Shut up.
Exactly.
We have indoor plumbing.
We're so spoiled.
three of the four Beatles grew up without indoor plumbing.
Yeah, exactly.
So we are spoiled, and fortunately, if we know that, we can make the most of every day and enjoy it and do something that we love and meaningful, and you're doing it. So you should just charge for your channel.
That's down the road.
No, no, now.
It does
Start,
okay, but yeah.
right.
All right. Well, we could wrap it up there, David. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but um, thank you so much for doing this. It's a complete honor and a thrill of a lifetime to talk to you because you have been a part of my brain for many, many years between the movies I've watched and especially I'll throw in this one, the Marx Brothers one. There, I love that one.
It's great to be with you, and let's do it again. Sometime this year.
Completely. Thank you so much, David. It means so much to me.
My pleasure. I'm glad that the work I'm doing actually is being seen and heard and has an impact.
Oh yeah, over and over. Yeah. David, thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure. Take care.
You too.
Bye now.